his equipment updated, and then he was gonna go back home.
Oh, no, really?
Well, he just, apparently it's something he does.
You want to do a moment of silence?
Pardon?
Moment of silence?
No, I can do this.
Okay.
We'll go ahead. Don can join us. I'll take care of it. Anyone who wishes to, please join me for the invocation and then the pledge. Heavenly Father, please watch over us all. Help us to make wise decisions for the benefit of the county. Help us also to remember that on matters where we disagree, those are just that. Those are matters. Those aren't personal, and those don't have anything to do with defining us as people. We are all of one blood, and we are all wanting to do the best we can, and with your help, we will do so. In Jesus' name, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Bell.
Present via Zoom, City of St. Joseph.
Curran.
Present via Zoom, Niles Township.
Freely.
Present via Zoom, Baroda Township.
Harrison.
Present via Zoom from Lincoln Township.
Hinkleman.
He's just entering right now. Come back to him, please.
Okay. Majerick.
Present via Zoom, Niles, Michigan.
Meeks. Scott.
Present via Zoom from Buffalo Township.
Ballrath.
Present via Zoom in Coloma Township.
Werfel.
Present via Zoom, Royalton Township.
Yarborough.
Present via Zoom, City of Benton Harbor.
Elliott.
Present.
Hinkleman.
Present, Watervliet, Zoom.
Mr. Chair, you have 11 present and 1 absent.
Thank you.
And they're telling me that he's having trouble getting in, so he's working with IS right now to fix that.
Just let me know when you...
I will.
The minutes from last week, from the 28th of January, need to be approved. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Curran. I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion. Michael Majerick.
Moved by Curran, supported by Majerick. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Curran.
Yes.
Freely.
Yes.
Harrison.
Yes.
Hinkleman.
Yes.
Majerick.
Yes.
Meeks. Scott.
Yes.
Ballrath.
Yes.
Werfel.
Yes.
Yarborough.
Yes.
Bell.
Yes.
Elliott.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, you have 11 yeas.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, can you tell us about communications?
Yes, I have emailed you all communications. The first one is R. Tyler Dotson, Watervliet City Manager, an email and a show of appreciation to Berrien County Clerk Sharon Tyler and her staff in administrating a safe and successful November 3rd, 2020 election, received on January 28th. Alpena County Board of Commissioners, a pandemic resolution received on January 29th. Antrim County Board of Commissioners, a resolution in support of local business received on January 29th. Tuscola County Board of Commissioners, a resolution declaring Tuscola County a constitutional Second Amendment sanctuary county received on February 3rd. That's all.
Actually, I think we have one more that you missed.
She mentioned it.
One that merits reading aloud, I guess I should say. This is the one from Waterville, in the city of Waterville, from Tyler Dotson, who's the city manager, dated January 28, 2021, addressed to me. Mr. Chair and members of the Berrien County Commission, please accept this letter as a show of appreciation to Berrien County Clerk Sharon Tyler. Ms. Tyler and her staff went above and beyond to assist the city of Waterville in administering a safe and successful November 3, 2020 election. Facing a series of unique situations during the COVID-19 pandemic, Ms. Tyler's knowledge, communication, and professionalism was instrumental in assisting city staff to meet the needs of our community and our voters. Because of her efforts, our processes and procedures and overall administration of the election were successful. As such, the city is appreciative and grateful for her time and patience, and we look forward to continuing a strong relationship with her office both now and into the future. Best regards, Tyler Dotson, City Manager. Okay, we have a presentation from Dan Fetty now on transportation.
And Brian.
Oh.
Okay, so commissioners, those in the finance committee have already heard this. We have a little problem with our communications so that the public can participate, but our IS department has developed a procedure for making that happen. But what I'm going to have you guys do right now, if you would please, is to unmute yourselves and also take yourselves off video, or to put your videos on at this point until we get through the public comments regarding resolutions. We will be allowing the public, and I'm going to put this up on the screen here in a minute as soon as I get my settings right. We are going to be allowing the public to join our room and to communicate with you through the chat option that is on Zoom. So if you could do that, please try to keep your background noises and that kind of things down. The reason why we're having to do this is because you will not have the control to unmute or to show your videos in just 1 second. And that's the reason why it's good for you to do that now if you can. All right, now hold on, please.
Disclosure, I have a several-month-old puppy who's having issues with a Nylabone. So if I'm on unmute, I'm sorry.
Oh, wait, I'm gonna have to leave that so you can do that.
Hey, while we're waiting, can I ask Dan Fetty a question? Dan, do we have any good news from Evan?
Not yet, Jim. I texted Evan this morning at about 6:45 and they're still waiting, but I'm sure the news is coming sometime today.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. That is allowed. Good there. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Okay. All right. So up on the screen, this is for the members of the public. All of the viewing of this meeting will be available on YouTube. You'll be able to see the meeting there and hear it no differently than any other week. The procedure, though, for participating in public comments is different for today. Members of the public who would like to have public comments. Now, our very first public comments is going to be following the committee reports, and that will be on the resolutions that are being voted on today only. That's not for general public comments. So, if you do have a public comment about the resolutions, then you would need to follow the instructions on the screen. Viewers will need to go to the website zoom.us, or to put the Zoom app, or if they have the Zoom app, they can do it through there as well. The meeting ID and the passcode is on the screen, and I will put that back up again when we are done with the presentation on transportation. Then way that you'll provide those comments is through the chat option on Zoom, and they will be read as part of the public record, just like they have been in the past. So I'm going to go ahead and take this down for now, and then I will put it up again before the public comments regarding resolutions.
And am I safe to pull up the other screen share?
You are.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we ready to go?
Mr. Chair, are you ready for us to proceed?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm here today because there are two resolutions passed through finance that appear on the consent calendar for you this morning, both related to Berry and Bus. And we thought it was a good opportunity since these are funding and regulatory matters that need to be taken care of for Berry and Bus. We thought it was a good opportunity to come in and give you an update on what's happened with Berry and Bus over the last 6 months, how we finished the year operationally and financially, what we anticipate in 2021, and some of the proposed changes to operations that we'll have to consider or address throughout this year. As you can see, Evan was originally scheduled to give his presentation, but he is actually awaiting the birth of his first child this morning. So I'm going to try to struggle through this the best I can. He's the real expert, but I think I can make this understandable. Can you, Brian, can you go to the next one? Okay, as I said, this is basically the agenda for this presentation. The resolutions, events over April 19 through 21, operations and a financial summary, and then some next steps that we're going to undertake this year. Okay, the first resolution you're going to see this on the consent calendar is F2102156, and this is our annual application to MDOT for transportation funding. Every year, this time of the year, we're required to submit this resolution. It's essentially a placeholder that ensures that our bus system is eligible for state and federal financial assistance in 2022. This is for the 2022 federal budget. A couple things I would mention here is that this is, as I said, just a placeholder. We always end up amending this at some point throughout the year. It's not technically due in final form until August, so I fully anticipate, depending on what happens over the next 6 months, we will probably be amending our request to MDOT, but this at least makes us eligible for funding next year. It doesn't tie us into any funding. If we have a completely modified system, we're not on the hook for any money. This is just to allow for our reimbursements to flow through, depending on the level of operations next year. The next resolution, F2102157, is our triannual renewal of our Title VI anti-discrimination policy. Under Title VI, we have to assert that we will not discriminate based on race, ethnicity, and I believe gender. That Title VI policy is required for recipients of all federal funding, and every 3 years we have to renew and reaffirm that policy. So this is more or less just a pro forma action that's required to comply with federal regulations. Okay, so let me jump in, and this is really for the new commissioners who haven't been deeply involved in the saga of Berry and Bus, and for some of the commissioners who maybe haven't been that closely involved over the years. This is just a kind of a recap of what's happened over the last 2 years with Berry and Bus. In February of 2019, the Board of Commissioners passed a resolution that created what we call the BCAT. This is the Berry County Advisory Committee, and it's comprised of Commissioner Freeling, Commissioner Curran, and Commissioner Harrison. And they were tasked with working with our department to try to come up with some resolutions to provide long-term sustainability for the general ridership, or public ridership side of the Berry and Bus operations. In May 19, following conversations and recommendations with the BCAT, Berry County Board of Commissioners passed a resolution to create a pilot transportation program that modeled, to some degree, various services that were contemplated in a large service plan that was completed a few years ago by the Regional Planning Commission. To carry out that pilot program, the board also appropriated $100,000 per year over a 2-year period because we knew it was going to be an expensive program to run, and the board agreed that this was a good kind of test run at what expanded route-based service throughout Berrien County would look like. I will mention that we never drew down those funds because, well, COVID occurred and a lot of changes happened, which I'll discuss in the next slide. So in March, the governor issued the executive order that suspended the stay-at-home orders and so forth, and basically we had to suspend all operations, including the pilot program, and we reduced Berrien Bus down to an essential services only system. Partly as a result of that, in May 2020, TMI, which is the company that managed or operated Berrien Bus on our behalf, decided that they were going out of business. They were no longer going to be involved in the bus operations business. And that set us scrambling to try to figure out what to do. They gave us from May until July 1st to come up with some plan to address this. The Board of Commissioners, we recommended, the Board of Commissioners agreed that Berrien County would hire back a number of TMI employees, drivers, dispatchers, office managers, and so forth, to keep the operations running. They were hired on a temporary status only. That's a 1,000-hour per year status. But by about July 1st, we had most of the staff in place, and then moving into the fall, we were able to fill out the full complement and to resume operations with Berrien Bus. In November, you recall, we proposed our budget for 2021 for Berrien Bus, and that maintained our current employment complement at temporary status for 1,000 hours a year. We also included a contingency within that budget in the event that we exceeded or any employee exceeded that 1,000-hour limitation. There's contingency in place in the event there has to be a reclassification of employees. That may or may not arise this summer, and if it does, we'll have to work with the Personnel Committee to determine how to handle that issue. Ongoing, BCAT's been meeting regularly to evaluate options for Berrien Bus moving forward in terms of operational structure and financial sustainability for 2021 and beyond. As a side note, I should mention we've managed Buchanan Dial-A-Ride for almost a decade now. This winter, Buchanan and the city of Niles have been in discussions to have Niles take over the management and operation of Buchanan's Dial-A-Ride. We've been assisting in that because we think it's actually more appropriate for Niles and Buchanan to be not necessarily consolidated, but to be managed under the same lines, both because of geographic reasons and because they have identical funding, federal funding structures. So that is an ongoing discussion that's probably going to be completed before the federal 2022 fiscal year starts in October. At the same time, we've been meeting with we will be meeting with representatives of various municipalities with high concentrations of ridership in the hopes of forming some new partnerships and identifying additional sources of local revenue so that we can sustain the rural transit services for general public. So that's the timeline of what's going on. Now I want to talk briefly about our operations and our finance. Berrien Bus's program is divided into two distinct types of service. We have contract service, where we, with human resource agencies or human services agencies, RISA, the Truancy Academy, a number of congregate care facilities, area agency on aging to some degree. And we provide a per hour service to these agencies on a contract basis. It's important to note that our contracts always generate surplus income every year. And that surplus income helps to fund the general public services. Then we have the general public services. This is what you think of as the demand response service. You call up, you ask for a ride, the bus comes to your house, picks you up, takes you where you need to go. That is the service that we've had such trouble with over the last decade or so. We're losing money every year on the general public service. We're using the revenues from the contract service to offset those losses, but we're still operating at a deficit because of the general public service. This is just an example of some of our contract partners. These are the programs we're running out of RISA, the Blossom Land Offsite programs, and so forth, and you can see where our buses are traveling on a routine basis throughout the county. Again,
Oops.
sorry.
There you go.
Yeah, again, this is the Truancy Academy service that we ride. This is a large contract for us. We transport a number of individuals all throughout the county and even into Cass County to some degree. We have partnerships with for various medical purposes. DHHS we partner with for transportation medical services, Area Agency on Aging, Westwood of Niles, Buchanan Senior Center, and Michigan Rehabilitation Services. These are what are considered non-emergency medical transport trips, all by contract. And then we have educational partners, the Career Technical Education Consortium, Berrien Springs Schools, Lakeshore Schools. We expect that some of these educational contracts are going to increase over the coming year. The good news is that we finished fiscal year 2020 with a surplus for the first time in probably a decade, about $26,600 of surplus income. That will increase or has increased our fund balance to a little over $200,000. Now these are unaudited numbers, but we don't expect there's much that's off on them. So this is the first time for the commissioners that have been around and involved in this for a while. You know, this is the first time in years that we haven't been panicky about finishing the year in a deficit. Our hours were significantly reduced, though, about 25% lower than what we would see in a typical year, and that's obviously entirely related to COVID. Nevertheless, because there's been increases in federal reimbursement via the CARES Act, that's what allowed us, despite the lower operating hours, that's what allowed us to finish with a surplus for the first time in years. Those increases are going to continue throughout this year and into a portion of next year as it's written right now, potentially even longer than that. So we're in an unusual situation in that we're not facing any kind of immediate financial emergency for Berrien Bus, which has generally been the case almost every year when we go through this. We're in very good shape. We expect to finish this year with a surplus, and we expect to move into 2022 probably with a surplus as well, with additional increases in our fund balance. Nevertheless, we got long-term problems that do need to be addressed. Our bus system is funded largely by state and federal grant assistance. We get 36% reimbursement of our costs by the state, and we typically get 18% of our costs reimbursed by the federal government. With the passage of the CARES Act, our federal reimbursements have more than doubled last year, this year, and moving into 2022. There was a doubling to 36%. There's also an additional 9% that's been added on top of that to bring a total of 45% cost reimbursement through the federal government. That'll continue more or less through into 2022 and maybe beyond. Here's an example of what we're looking at vehicle hours. You can see, I mean, our vehicle hours have been relatively stable, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. They fluctuate around, I think it's, 15,000 hours a year. Fiscal year 2020, you can see there's a huge reduction in our vehicle hours. I think we were just below 12,000 vehicle hours for the year. Our ridership numbers, unfortunately, are declining. A lot of that has to do with the decline of some of our contracts over the years. And of course, in 2020, we can see our ridership numbers bottomed out because we weren't operating for months. You can also see our use of fund balance. This is where we're drawing down in order to balance the deficit that we've been experiencing consistently over the years. We've tried to reduce that fund balance draw over the years, largely by limiting the amount of service provided. And of course, in 2020, as I said, we showed a surplus. We will show a surplus in 2021 as well, and probably 2022. All right, this is the meat of the presentation. This is really what I wanted to get at, because I think this explains the challenge that we're facing here. Public transit systems are funded on what's called an 80-20 rule, where 80% of the system revenue comes from federal and state reimbursements and passenger fares. 20% of all activities have to be funded by some source of local revenue. And that's typically a millage for most communities, or sometimes an appropriation from the local government. For Berrien Bus, historically, that 20% source of local revenue has come from the income or the profit that we've earned on our contracts. And that was generally enough to offset any general public law or ridership loss, or losses on public ridership. But that was our 20%. It was the profit on the contracts, not a millage, not an appropriation. As state and federal government programs have been cut really since around 2009, various public service agencies that we had provided contract ridership to have had to cancel their contracts or reduce their contracts because they don't have the public assistance for them anymore. That's reduced the number of contract hours we operate, which has reduced our net income to the point where it's no longer sufficient to subsidize general ridership. So we need some additional source of revenue if we're going to preserve the public ridership side of our operations. The contract side is fine, but the public ridership is the one that's in jeopardy here. And I put this up here as an example to show you how this math works out for us. On the one hand, we have the general public services. It costs us about $55 an hour to operate a bus. 18% of that is reimbursed by the feds. This is in a general year. 36% by the state. We shoot for 3 people on the bus per hour, which gives us about $15 of fare box receipt. But you can see that leads us with an operating loss per hour of $10.30. Every time that we're running the bus for general public service, we are losing $10.30 an hour in doing it. The contract service, on the other hand, you can see that reimbursement from the state and federal government are the same. Our contracts average about $36 per operating hour. Some are higher, some lower, but that's kind of the average figure. So for every hour of contract service, we have a profit of $10.70. This is an example of where we are with the CARES Act, with the federal reimbursements being much higher, more than double. We are now operating at a profit on a per hour basis on both general public service and contract service, as you can see. But like I said, that'll go away eventually, and we'll find ourselves back in a situation where we're losing money on the general public service, right? If we were able to maintain a 1-to-1 ratio of contract hours to general public hours, we'd be able to operate the whole system at a break-even rate or greater forever. But the decline in the ratio, we currently run about 1 hour of contract service for every 2 hours of public service, has produced persistent deficits, which require some alternate source of revenue if the general public ridership service is to be preserved. For example, if we operate at 50,000 hours a year at $55 an hour, the 20% local share of that cost works out to about $160,000 in local revenue that's necessary. Our contracts are typically providing between $50,000 and $65,000 a year in net revenue, net income, which leaves us with about a $100,000 deficit every year. We've tried to reduce this by limiting public ridership to the degree possible, but it's always leaving us in a deficit position. So we have to think of a way to come up with some local revenue if we want to preserve that general public ridership, and we're envisioning approaching local municipalities where we have a high level of general public ridership and seeing whether or not we can form partnerships with those municipalities to both manage the system and help fund the system within their community. What we are offering, and we are going to have these discussions, the BCAP has endorsed this as a course of action, and we will be meeting with communities, and what we're going to offer them is a cost share dedicated public ridership system within their municipality to be paid for on a per hour basis. So under this model, a local municipality would execute a partnership agreement for an annual block of vehicle hours at a per dollar basis, probably about $10 an hour, depending on what we think the size of the ridership would be. And under that partnership, Berrien Bus will assign a portion of his existing fund balance to help subsidize the introduction of that service. We think these partnerships could be created under Public Act 7 of 1967, the Urban Cooperation Act. That act provides that partner communities can establish a management body to administer and share the service, or administer the shared service. And this would allow these community partners, if they were interested in doing this, to share in the management of the purchased services within their area. Now, this is a model that's been successfully used in other counties who are facing the same kind of dilemma that we have. It is flexible and it's scalable to the needs and available funding levels of the local communities. It would also provide the local communities with operational and managerial oversight of the service that they're paying for. And most importantly, it avoids the need to impose some kind of county-wide funding program on communities that don't necessarily desire to pay for public transit services. And that's been an issue in the past when we talk about a countywide authority, for example. This would be on a case-by-case basis where it's formed at the local partnership level. If this is supported by the Board of Commissioners and it is recommended by the BCAT group, we will begin these discussions with local units immediately with the goal and the hope of having some new partnership forms agreed upon by the midsummer so that we can start next year in federal fiscal year 2022 with a new system of operations for public service. Additionally, we feel obligated to meet with our contract counterparties to tell them what the plan is, and we will do that as soon as we're meeting with the communities. So I know that was a lengthy presentation. It's a lot of information to get through, but we felt you deserved a somewhat detailed explanation.
Brian, before you weigh in, Terry, Bob, and Jim, anything to add?
Not for me. I think Dan did a good job. Dan and Evan did a good job kind of giving us the historical perspective as well as what we think is a viable direction for the future. So I think he covered it very well.
Thanks. Jim or Terry?
Yeah, I would agree with Bob's comments. I think Dan did an excellent job of explaining the history of the institution we're in. So good job, Dan.
And Mr. Chair, the only thing I would wish to add is you can tell through this presentation the complexity of the discussion and the decisions that are in front of us. And I think that staff has really done their due diligence of trying to bring different viable solutions to the committee to then roll out to this full board for discussion and consideration.
Thank you. Mr. Administrator.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, members of the board, one thing I just want to make clear to the board is there's been some rumblings, some rumors that the county is trying to grow the service area. As you can see through this presentation, that is in no way what we are trying to do. If anything, it's the opposite. As we run this system, if not for the CARES Act, each year that you run the system, you are essentially losing money. And so I'm going to ask Dan to drill down into this topic, but I want to make clear that anything that the commissioners may be hearing from the local level about the county trying to go out and grab more service area, that's not the case. Dan, do you have anything to add to that?
No, Brian, that's absolutely correct. I mean, we have heard rumors from time to time in that regard, but our partners, the other providers in the area have been clear that their intention is to run their systems locally, and we have no interest in trying to disturb that whatsoever.
Those are my comments, sir.
Questions or comments from the board? Yes, ma'am. Julie?
I have a couple questions. You mentioned that the contracts have declined due to some of their loss of revenue from those partners. If there are there any other reasons? And, you know, because how would we intend to get those contracts back if that revenue is gone?
Yeah, it's a good question. What's happened is a lot of the contracts that we're running for social service agencies are funded by grant funds from the state and federal government that those agencies are receiving. And there's been a huge reduction in certain programs. You can think of the Gateway program, LAD, I mean, we can go into these in detail. But as the state and federal revenue for those programs has dried up, that's caused the transportation component, our contracts, to also dry up. What we've tried to do is offset that by seeking new contracts, primarily through adult education programs and other special education programs administered throughout the county. And there has been some offset, and it's helped. But the big contracts we had, say, in the 80s and the 90s that provided massive amounts of revenue, there's very little likelihood that those contracts are going to come back to the extent that they would be sufficient to cover our losses on the general public ridership side. We do expect, Commissioner, though, that moving into late 2021 and 2022, we're going to see increases in our contract revenue because so many of the school programs will be back in person instead of virtual. So we'll see Truancy Academy revenues go up. We'll see continuing adult education program revenues going up. But in simple terms, the big money-making contracts from the 80s and the 90s, those are not a reality anymore for us.
Okay, very good. And the same type of question on the second one is, but for our residents. So if we go back to the calling for a ride versus, routes or a complete transportation changeover, how do we expect for that to change if we just continue to do the same thing?
Well, that's precisely the challenge that we're facing, is that we have a service that is somewhat, again, for the general ridership operation side. It's cumbersome, it's difficult for people to use. We have such a large geography that we have to cover that it's impossible for us to run a fixed route service from point to point. We tried doing this when we implemented the pilot program, and discouragingly, we found that we were running empty buses for multiple hours a day. So running a fixed route system across a geography the size of Berrien County is just almost impossible to do. You don't have people on the bus consistently enough to cover your costs at all. So we have to run this demand response service. Unfortunately, because we're losing money on that side of it, it's a limited service to begin with. We think the only option to kind of boost that service, make it more usable and more important for the residents, is to find some local partnerships where communities are willing to actually pay into the cost of providing that service. And then that would provide a foundation that we could start to build upon at that point.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, I mean, it really comes down to population density.
Yeah.
This can work, but it has to be in an area where there's a somewhat dense population.
Don?
Yes, I have a question about revenue and consolidation. If our three transportation authorities can consolidate, is there more federal money that we can get?
The short answer is no. The money available to any transit system is based on the number of hours that the transit system operates.
Yeah, but I was kind of reading some things about the federal government don't expect these public transportation authorities to make a profit. It's never expected. I think I read that somewhere.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, transit systems across the nation don't operate at a profit. They need massive amounts of public subsidy. Yeah.
Okay.
But
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, just again to follow up on this, VCAT has been working on this, Dan and his team have been working on this, and at this point, the intent is to actively go out and seek partners. But the message that I just want to make sure that the commissioners are completely aware of is, if you take us out of the CARES Act, this thing is not sustainable.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have, over the years. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Many years ago, and that's what I wanted to know, what is the ultimate? Because what we did, I think last year, is gave that $100,000 for 2 years to try to, see what would happen, and communities would come in with it. This is not a new, discussion or problem, but that's what I wanted to know. Is there a time when you'll say it's working and we're going to go on with this, or a time when you'll have to say we can no longer do this?
Commissioner, yeah, I guess what I would say is if we find that by the middle of this summer, there's no appetite on the part of local communities to contribute to the operations or funding of public ridership, then I think we know where we stand. The contract side of our operations, we could continue to run that indefinitely, because we break even at least on that, or make money. But if we're into the middle of the summer and no one is willing to bite on this, and no one feels that it's important for their community to have the service, then we have our answer at that point.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for all your input.
Other questions, comments?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
This is Commissioner Freeling. I think the only comment that I would make with regards to this, the conversation that would happen in VCAT quite frequently was about making certain that while the service right now is not sustainable in its current structure, is figuring out how we can regroup that. You know, we've been challenged not only with the system that is needed to be rethought, but also in the midst of a pandemic. But one of the biggest things that I think would be concerning to me is if we somehow neglected to always keep in our foresight those who are transit dependent on these systems, and making certain whatever solution we come forward with is going to meet the needs of those individuals who are transit dependent. And I think what Dan and Evan have presented as a solution is something that is worthwhile to continue to look forward to implementing.
And just to follow up on that statement, the reason we're here today is to make sure this is on the radar of the commissioners, but also on the radar of the public. We're trying to craft an agreement that takes transit and makes it something that is sustainable for decades to come. We're trying to use this platform as a way to reach out to potential partners to say that we've got an issue, that we have a very real desire to partner, but with the CARES Act funding in place, we've got some time. We have the luxury of time right now to figure out what is the absolute best partner and try and put together a framework that can be sustainable. So that's the real benefit of the infusion of cash from the CARES Act is you have time to find the right partner, and you have time to do this so that people who are absolutely dependent on this service aren't caught by surprise and aren't left scrambling to try and find their transportation options.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments? We have done other ventures under the Urban Cooperation Act. And one of the provisions in that act is that you can withdraw on a certain amount of notice. I can't remember what the statute specifies or if it says in any joint venture document you need to spell out what the timeline is if someone, or if a political body, governmental body, decides to pull out. But that mechanism is baked into the statute, and the devil is in the details with this type of agreement. When you have multiple parties, when it's just two parties, it's real easy, because if one says, we don't want to do this anymore, then you know it's over. If you have five, then the question is continuation of the agreement by the remaining four. How is that going to work? How would that affect the service delivery area? Things of that sort all need to be spelled out. And there invariably is a tipping point when you have a multi-party agreement under the Urban Cooperation Act, such that under the example of 5 governmental units participating, if 2 of them say, we're done, chances are you're left with a bridge that's a little over halfway across the creek. And as bridges go, that doesn't do a whole lot for you. But I concur with Dan's projection. We'll have a pretty good view in the next 6 months or less in terms of where we stand with that ridership component. And as much as we aspire to maintain public transportation options for everyone who currently benefits from it, we may be confronted with some budget constraints if we are left with the prospect of trying to go it alone once the CARES Act funds have been used up. So, any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you, Dan. We'll move on to committee reports. Jim, you want to lead off?
Yeah, thank you, Mac. We went through a number of resolutions. Well, we met last Thursday after the Board of Commissioners meeting. And we went through a number of the resolutions that were presented last week and also are on for this week. There's one on the agenda for today. It's A2102162. And this authorizes the chairman of the LEPC, which is our very own Commissioner Volrath, to sign a grant application up to $1,500 for the Hazardous Materials Emergency Preparedness Grant. And I believe Dave has already signed that. So that is on the consent agenda for today to apply for that grant. Then we had Jason Latham from the Road Department come in and talk to us. In anticipation of his arrival, the committee put together questions for him prior to his arrival so that he would have time to research the answers and be more efficient to answer some of the concerns that the commissioners had. And we had a good discussion with the Road Department. And that's our report. Unless the committee members see that I missed anything, that's our report. Did you get that, Mac? That's our report.
Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Jim. The microphone was muted. Any questions for admin?
Jim, Ezra, listen, that discussion you had with the road committee, did you get everything that you wanted answered, or are you still going to be having further discussions with the road committee on issues or questions that the committee has or the commissioners have?
Well, I think there was a lot of ground gained by our questions, but yeah, there's still more work to be done, and we'll continue to follow up with that.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions for admin, we'll go on to finance. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Good morning. We had a very good meeting. Our main item that we worked on was with Administrative Assistant and Finance Director Doug James on our policy for our purchasing, something we talk about all the time and that we've been working on in pieces. It had not, it was one of the last ones was created in 2009. We did have a revision in 2012. And what Doug James came to us, he and Brian talked to us about, they think the policy that we have should be broken up into 3 parts. And one of them would be vendor management. The second would be the purchasing policy revised, including federal accounting and regulations. And then the third would be competitive bidding proposal. And so many things have happened to us just this year to make us know, because last week, you'll remember the Parks Department came to us with a sole provider, or sometimes it has to be with My Deal. And we can't assume all the time that that is the best price, because we found out this year that there was some things we could get locally, and we love to do business with local vendors first, that were under the My Deal. So just a number of things and a number of reasons. And so we're working on this, and there was a very good piece that Doug James, the finance department, has put together, and it lists those things I just talked about, the sole source, the My Deal, or an explanation of why you want to go with this instead of what we normally do. So, and we think that we're looking for a piece that will work with whatever kind of vendor or whatever department it comes from, because everything comes by finance when it's financial. But also there was another committee we thought things should go to. Would you tell me what that was? Was it admin or?
Personnel.
Personnel, that things will go there too, but still the Finance Committee would look over when it's purchase orders and bills. And that's one thing we wanted to clear up, because when we met all the time, every week we'd have papers that all four of us would sign saying, yes, go out for bids. We'd like to eliminate that part and trust that the department knows what they need. They can write up the specifications and all, and that through administrator to set with his initials or his signature, then it can go out for bids and will come back to us. And ultimately, we will always open the bids at a certain time on a certain date, so that for the clearness and the transparency and to do things right, we definitely need to keep that as some of the steps in the front that we think we can put with the different departments and depend on our staff to bring it to us and to have sent it out to as many people that do that kind of work. So that's what our main part of our meeting. And we're hoping to come back with, that's going to be sent to us, copies of that new proposal, and that we will soon make it right, and it will be the instrument we will use. We will not wait some years. We accepted our minutes, and that was about what we did. And I'd like to ask, are there any other additions? Woody?
Nothing for me, sir.
Any Finance Committee members have anything to add? Does anyone have any question for Finance? I have one.
Yes.
And it pertains to the resolution ending in 2156. And when Dan Fetty was here, I asked him about the wording in that resolution, and would like to know from Finance if it's okay to make a minor change in that resolution. Yep. And if I can find the second page of it, I'll tell you. It's down in the bottom paragraph where it talks about the authorization that is given to Evan in terms of I think it's supposed to be in terms of this MDOT contract, and I don't know where in the heck this thing is in the folder now. I've probably gone right by it 2 or 3 times. Okay, thank you. In the be it further resolved, the last paragraph, second sentence of that paragraph, it says the words "for all public transportation matters." And if you're agreeable, I would like to delete those words. I didn't catch it when I read this over the other day.
Okay.
But without those words, it would say, be it further resolved that the Berrien County Board of Commissioners hereby appoints Evan Smith as the Transportation and Planning Coordinator, who is authorized to provide such information as deemed necessary by the State Transportation Commission or Department for its administration of Act 51 for FY 2022. Are we okay with deleting "for all public transportation matters"? Because I find that to be a global statement and generally not comfortable with those. But what are your thoughts?
Mac, this is Commissioner Freeling. I'd be comfortable with that.
All right. Ezra, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with you're deleting those few words in that resolution. And if so, don't we need to approve that first, then the changes will be done so this can be voted on today?
Yes, we can approve it as part of a adoption of the consent calendar with the amendment noted as to resolution 2156.
Thank you.
My final parliamentarian. Do you concur?
Go ahead.
Terry?
Yes, sir. I do.
Thank you.
And I, as the, what am I? I forgot. What am I other than a commissioner?
Your chair of the finance.
I'm a chaplain. As a chaplain, I pray this will be a good move, and I agree.
Okay.
As a sergeant of arms, I also approve of this change. I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That gives me even greater comfort.
Okay.
All right, before we proceed, if there's nothing else on that revision, public comments?
Mr. Chair, this is Commissioner Freeland.
Yes, ma'am.
I do want to make the board aware and the public that I have requested to abstain on Resolution B Q102064, requisition number 49620 for vendor Rev Excavating for $20,000.
Very good, thank you, and the clerk will so note that in our minutes.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Commissioner Yarborough, if you want me to do your little blurb as well, unless you have it there.
Yes, please. I do not have it in front of me, but I abstain.
Okay, Commissioner Yarborough is abstaining from check number 208154, which is contained in resolution number F2102110. She's abstaining from that part of that resolution.
All right, very good. Again, so noted in the record of our minutes.
So for public comments for the resolutions, we do not have any members of the public who have joined with us to do that. So I'll pop that thing back up on the screen a little bit later once we get closer to public comments.
All right, thank you. Moving on then to the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar with the revision as noted to F2102156 by deleting in the second to the last line of that resolution the words "for all public transportation matters," but otherwise proceeding to approve all other resolutions and that resolution 2156 as revised? Is there a motion to do so?
I so moved. Mamie L. Yarborough.
Moved by Yarborough, supported by, I believe Commissioner Bell provided the support. So moved by Yarborough, supported by Bell. Any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Freeling. Freeling?
She has her thumbs up,
Yes.
Madam.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Harrison.
Yes.
Engelmann.
He said yes, got it.
Majeri.
You still here?
Is everybody getting sign language?
There he is. Oh, he muted himself. He can't unmute himself. There you go. Thumbs up.
All right.
Meeks.
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
Ballrap.
He's another one. Hang on just a second.
Want to come back to him?
Here's going.
You cut it off.
Yes.
There you go.
Werfel.
Yes.
Yarborough.
Yes.
Bell.
Yes.
Curran.
Yes.
Elliott.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, you have 12 yeas.
Thank you.
Sharon, if you would please note that Commissioner Freeland left the meeting at 11:31.
Okay.
She is going to try and join back on another way.
Sharon, do you want me to make a mark through those words on 2156 and put my initials after it, or do you just want to do a clean version of it?
That would be a next call, which you would.
Yeah, I'll have it here for you in just a second, Mac, and you can do that.
I think in some manner it should be marked and initialed so that it shows that it was changed after it was published on the website.
you might want to also change resolution B21-02164. If you look at the resolution, the last four numbers are 2064, and it should be 2164.
Okay. Will do. Is that okay? We had a scrivener's error on another resolution, 2164, on the requisitions where where it said 2064 instead of 2164. So with your permission, I'll mark that correction and put my initials after.
Mac, I approve of that too, as a person who has been the victim of a scrivener's error in the past.
Well, I understand, and in light of that, I've just made the revision on 2156 and put my initials there. And we'll go ahead and move into commissioner reports if anyone has any while I'm tweaking these resolutions. Anyone have anything to share?
This is Commissioner Harrison. I'd like to report on the health board meeting that was held yesterday. This is my first meeting as your representative to the health board. We received an update on funding allocations from the state of Michigan and several other funding agencies, all resulted in additional funding for various programs at the health department. We also had a lengthy update regarding COVID-19 with respects to testing, utilization of inpatient beds at Lakeland, the funding for school district and teacher vaccinations, as well as the use of volunteers in assist with some of the large vaccination events. So right now funding appears to be well in hand given our current state of affairs. And the last thing I'd like to report on, Lisa Eckenbrook, the financial manager for the health department, did submit her resignation. And I'd be glad to answer any questions from the board regarding that meeting.
Thanks, Bob. Anyone have any questions of Commissioner Harrison? All right. Anyone have anything else they'd like to share?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Commissioner Curran. I saw an email where we're going to get our boardroom updated with better audio, visual, etc. Will that eliminate this having to email or do whatever Annette's got to do today? I find that very obstructive to our public to try to communicate with it. It's so much easier on YouTube just to be able to type in, their question or comment. This seems awful burdensome. Will the upgrades take care of this?
The short answer is no. This is Brian Dissett. The upgrades will definitely improve the acoustics so that we are constantly having to mute this room right now because of the amount of background noise. The upgrade should also improve the camera system and as well as the display system. But at its core right now, what we're dealing with is it's a YouTube issue, and our IS department continues working with Annette, and we hope to have the YouTube streaming system back up and running where the public can communicate via YouTube. But fixing up the room is not going to fix that issue.
Okay, so the issue with YouTube is a temporary issue. It's fixable. Okay,
we believe so.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else have anything for show and tell?
One other thing today, Mac, we are having the BCBIT meeting, which is the Broadband Internet Task Force's meeting today.
Very good, thank you. If there aren't any other commissioner reports, we'll move to the administrator report.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair and members of the board. Oh, Annette, can I have the screen share?
I didn't know you were going to do that.
That's all right.
Sorry.
It's okay. Just 1 second, folks.
And I have to turn that back on, I believe, for you.
Okay, while you're doing that, just quickly, Commissioner Bell, Commissioner Werfel have been meeting with a variety of the county's department heads over the last several weeks. To date, they've had tours of parks. They've had tours of, I know that the Public Defender's Office, Julie was able to get in there, the courts. Just this past week, we got over to 911, to the EOC, and to the motor pool. They've also toured the health department, the road department, and then lastly, they've toured animal control. And I say lastly because animal control was recently featured, and I'm going to show a video real quick. So this is up on the county's webpage. It's a YouTube video that was prepared by the animal control department. And I won't go through the entire video, but if you looked at the screen, you can see a buck that got itself tangled up in a rope. And this is animal control working with local law enforcement. This is actually a chest cam. And you can see our animal control officer approaching. And if you take a look, I mean, this is a full-size buck that is just completely tangled up. And there is definitely a variety of options that could be considered, but the animal control officer worked. And I'll just fast forward to the end. But long story short, they were able to get the animal under control and cut away the rope. And I don't know how well this is streaming out to the commissioners, but the buck survived relatively unscathed from being trapped. And our officer did an absolutely great job of performing his work in a very humane manner. So Tiffany Peterson brought this video to my attention. I put it up in the weekly update sent out to the commissioners, but I thought I would just take a second and show the public just a day in the life of animal control, and I thought they did a really good job. So I wanted to share that with the board and just brag about some of your animal control officers. Those are my comments, sir.
Thank you. Now we'll go to general public comments.
Sharon, if you would please put down Commissioner Freeling re-entered at 11:33 in another way.
11:33?
Yep, so she wasn't got very long. I gotta check something here really quick. Well, look at that. Now, is it just me that can't? Public comments is working. So if we can hang on just a second, I'll check there as well, and hopefully people can put them there on YouTube.
Louise from the HP just confirmed that she's able to comment.
Yay!
So all it takes is Commissioner Curran saying, we want it back, and we made it happen.
Yeah.
I'm going to, okay, I do have, oops. Okay. Tony Benhart from Sodas Township. He would like to thank Chairman Curran and his committee members for the meeting with the road department, as it has changed the operation for the good. You have, yes, some more tweaking needs to be done in the future. The change was very notable with the last snowfall. And thank you to Brian, the administrator, for his hard work, taking the purchasing bids by the horns and doing it right. keep watching this if you want to, Mac, and then if you want to we'll just chat back for 1 second.
All right, we'll circle back to general public comments and before we adjourn, we'll move on to other business. Anyone have any other business? Announcements, reminders. We'll meet next week, the 11th at 10:30 under this same Zoom arrangement. Hopefully YouTube will be allowing for seamless comments from the general public. Committee meetings next week. Brian, do you know who's planning to meet?
Finance at 9.
Yeah, so we have PHS 8 a.m. on Thursday, Finance at 9, BOC at 10:30, and then admin is up in the air. I've got to connect with the chair about when to next get them in the room.
UHC is at 8:30, you said?
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock?
Yep.
Okay.
Great, and I know we have our COVID briefing with the health department next Wednesday at 11. Otherwise, we'll see before we go if there are any public comments that have worked their way through.
No, there hasn't been any. The other ones are just a matter of chat's working, yay, chat's working, ta-da. So
Okay.
we're good.
All right then, if there's nothing else, we'll stand adjourned to next Thursday at 10:30. Have a good day.
Thank you all. Have a good weekend. Bye.